Fox, out. Fox, no, god damn it. Fox. What's up, guys? Today we are going to talk about how to create cinematic looking images. Remember, all of these are creative choices and you need to choose them depending on what kind of film you are making. Before we get started, you guys need to know how to use your exposure settings, ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. If you need a refresher or don't know these yet, click on the link below in the description where we made a full video explaining how to use these three techniques. After you've done that, let's get started. The first thing that I like to do is set my frame rate. We're gonna put our camera in 24 frames per second. We're gonna set our shutter speed to 1/48 or 180 degrees. That's the 180 degree shutter rule, which is gonna give us the most pleasant motion blur. The next thing we wanna do is set our camera in light for the camera's native ISO. This is gonna give us the lowest grain possible and keep our images looking crisp. Moving on, make sure your camera is set to a log profile. This is going to give us the most dynamic range when we bring our images into post for color correction. For example, we're shooting on the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. This has the capability of shooting RAW, which is going to allow us to make changes to the camera settings in post. If you don't have that, just make sure it is set to as log as possible. For the Sony cameras, it's going to be S-Log3. For Canon DSLRs, it's going to be neutral setting. And also make sure you turn the sharpness all the way down. A lot of manufacturers will turn this up and they will take away from your cinematic image. The next step would be to set your aperture. Remember guys, this is a completely creative choice, but a lot of films will set their aperture to a lower number, thus giving them a shallower depth of field and separating their talent from the background. Guys, make sure you are using manual focus. There are guys out there that have based their entire life careers on this. They're called first ACs. It's gonna take some practice, but this is gonna give you the most control over where your focus is. Remember, this is a skill and you're gonna have to learn, so it's gonna take some time. Setting your lens to manual focus is going to give you guys more control over what's in focus. You'll be able to do rack focuses from one person to another, and you will be able to keep the audience engaged on what you want them to see. Another cinematic choice is aspect ratio. These black bars at the top and bottom of the screen are added to soak the audience into the cinematic experience. There's a lot of different aspect ratios. 1:8:5, 2:3:9, 16:9. It's really just another tool to help you tell your story. If you're shooting a commercial project, you probably want to be 16:9 or the original aspect of the frame. If you're telling a super cinematic story and you want to draw your audience into a cinematic world, you would shoot 2:3:9. But then when you start getting higher up in the film world, you'll start using lenses that will give you this aspect ratio in camera. For example, anamorphic lenses. Lighting, I would say, is the most important step to getting cinematic images. Yeah, having a really nice camera will definitely help, but if you have flat looking images, even on a red Monstro, you're still gonna get horrible student film looking images. So the first thing I make sure is that there's no front facing flat light on your subject. We're going for cinematic images here, so we really want to make sure that there's depth on our character's face and body. So go ahead and move that front light over to the side or position your character so that that light is not hitting them directly in the face. The next thing I like to do is mix up color temperatures or make sure there's some shadow on their face. If there's moonlight coming in and practicals lighting the interior, make sure that those are contrasting colors. That'll really help sell the cinematic look. Also, adding a backlight will separate your character from the background and make sure that they don't blend in. Talent placement is a huge thing. Time and time again, I see the character pushed up with their back against the wall. This is going to give you no separation from the background, and it's going to make it extremely hard to light your character. Try moving them forward and away from the wall. Try moving furniture around. This also has to do with framing, right? So if you have your character backed up against the wall, it's gonna be really hard to frame an interesting shot. Framing can tell your audience how to feel. If you frame your talent at the bottom of frame and leave a lot of negative space above him, it's gonna make him feel small and lonely. And if you fill the frame with someone's face, it's gonna feel intrusive and claustrophobic. There are a ton of ways to frame an image, and of course, like everything else, there's gonna be a few rules to framing. For example, if you're shooting a conversation between two people, they need to be on the correct side of the frame so they look like they're talking to each other. And guys, camera movement is key. Remember, we're telling stories here, so we need to move the camera to make the audience feel how we want them to feel. For example, if your character is still scared out of his mind, you probably want to put that camera on a tripod to mimic the character's actions. Another example, if there's a fight sequence, you're gonna be moving that camera around and really bringing the audience into the fight and moving them around with the fight to up the intensity. Another thing, if a character is moving slow with her hair blowing in the wind, you probably want to mimic that and add a smooth camera motion with a dolly, a gimbal, or a Steadicam to mimic that and make our audience feel what you want them to feel. The last thing I want to talk about is sound design and Foley. Guys, you need to have good sound to create a cinematic image. For example, if you have someone walking through the grass, add that crunchy footstep to it. If there's a storm rolling in, go ahead and add some lightning, some thunder sounds. That's really gonna engage your audience and pull them into the frame. So we used all these techniques to create our own cinematic film. I'm gonna take you guys through step by step and show you the creative choices that I used to make it happen. So be sure to check out part 2 on how to make your films more cinematic. Link in the description for the full breakdown. If you guys like the video, please click that subscribe button below. And we're creating these to help you guys become better filmmakers. So hit that subscribe button and I'll see you next time.